On se sent en famille en ce sens que la Russie est une famille aussi pour l'Afrique. C'est une famille parce que nous avons la même histoire. La Russie a consenti d'énormes sacrifices pour libérer le monde du nazisme pendant la Seconde Guerre mondiale. Les peuples africains, nos grands-pères, ont été déportés de force aussi pour aider l'Europe à se débarrasser du nazisme. Nous partageons la même histoire en ce sens que nous sommes les peuples oubliés du monde. Qu'ils soient dans les livres d'histoire, dans les documentaires ou films, on tend donc à balayer le rôle prépondérant qu'a joué la Russie et de l'Afrique dans cette lutte contre le nazisme.
Just a few months ago, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the president of Burkina Faso, had declared that Russia means family to Africa. At that time, people realized that the future of Russia and Africa was connected. However, nobody expected that soon, Burkina Faso and Russia would militarily cooperate. For Russian President Vladimir Putin, Captain Ibrahim Traoré is a respectable man who knows how to make Africa and his country great. This has been proven as, just recently, the West was shocked by the news that Russia deployed troops to Burkina Faso. Earlier, there were estimates that the terrorism in Burkina Faso was somehow linked to France. In that way, France got an excuse to have troops stationed in Burkina Faso. But Ibrahim Traoré kicked them out, leaving a space to be filled. So, how many Russian troops have been deployed to Burkina Faso, and what are they tasked with? Will they end foreign-sponsored terrorism in Burkina Faso once and for all? Let's find out. So, how does all that start? Back in 2022, everything changed in Burkina Faso forever. The country was changing the trajectory that would lead it to a different future than what had been planned. The man changing that future was Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who became Burkina Faso's interim president. Nobody had expected that he had planned to change the fate of Burkina Faso, making it a model African state.
C'est décevant, parce qu'en Europe, lorsque des peuples prennent les armes pour défendre leur patrie, on les traite de patriotes. Mais là n'est pas le problème. Ce qui est le problème, c'est de voir des chefs d'État africains qui n'apportent rien à ces peuples qui se battent, mais qui chantent la même chose que les impérialistes en nous traitant de milices, en nous traitant donc d'hommes qui ne respectent pas les droits de l'homme. De quels droits de l'homme parle-t-on? Nous nous offusquons contre cela et c'est honteux. Il faut que nous, chefs d'État africains, nous arrêtons de nous comporter donc en marionnettes qui dansent à chaque fois que les impérialistes tirent sur les ficelles. Hier, le président Vladimir Poutine a annoncé donc l'envoi de céréales en Afrique. Nous sommes bien contents. Nous lui disons merci pour cela.
After the coup in Burkina Faso, demonstrators looked to Russia for help, expressing frustration with France's inability to quell militant violence. The morning following the coup, a crowd gathered in the capital's main plaza, cheering the military takeover and conveying two clear messages to the world: rejecting France and embracing Russia. The sudden call for Moscow's assistance underscores how Islamist violence in the Sahel region is reshaping alliances and challenging pro-Western democratic orders. Many protesters cited Russia's involvement in the Central African Republic, where Russian forces protect the president, oversee diamond mining operations, and repelled an Islamist offensive last year. Others pointed to Russia's recent engagement in Mali, Burkina Faso's northern neighbor. Burkinabe citizens said they have seen positive outcomes from Russian involvement in other African nations and hope they can achieve the same in Burkina Faso. Andrew Lebovich, a policy fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations, pointed out that Europe, especially France, has faced challenges in dealing with jihadist groups in the Sahel, which have opened the door for Russia to bolster its security cooperation, particularly in Mali. Russian involvement in Africa typically focuses on countries with abundant resources that urgently need military assistance, where Western influence is waning or absent. According to Western experts, Russian support often comes in the form of military advisors, weaponry, or mercenaries, funded through cash payments or mining concessions for valuable resources like gold and diamonds. Russia's recent involvement in Mali, where the ruling military junta enlisted the Wagner Group in its campaign against Islamists, has drawn scrutiny and condemnation from France, especially following reported clashes between Russian mercenaries and Islamist militants. However, in Burkina Faso, where efforts supported by France have faced challenges in confronting Islamist groups, public sentiment increasingly favors Russian intervention. Some see Russia as a viable alternative, inspired by Mali's defiance of France and its pivot towards Russia. But who took care of Burkina Faso's security? One of the biggest challenges the country has been grappling with is terrorism. However, there have been secret reports that France can have a hand in this. In this way, France ensured that its troops were always needed. Secretly, these troops ensured French interests in Burkina Faso. However, after French troops were kicked out, terrorism stayed. You can guess the increase in terrorist activities after French troops exited to make Burkina Faso realize how important those troops were. That's when Captain Ibrahim Traoré decided to use the secret card he had up his sleeve: start a military collaboration with Russia. Since assuming leadership in Burkina Faso in September 2022, Captain Ibrahim Traoré has kept his alliances secret. However, the arrival of the Russian aircraft at the capital's Thomas Sankara airport, carrying around 20 soldiers, shed some light on the matter. 9 months after the conclusion of French operations in Burkina Faso, the junta forged a new partnership with Vladimir Putin's Russia. In recent weeks, the Burkinabe government has displayed several indications of drawing closer to Moscow across various domains. In October, a press release from Burkina Faso's executive outlined cooperation in humanitarian aid, energy, nuclear power, and culture. In mid-month, the Russian agency Rosatom announced plans for a civil nuclear power plant aimed at meeting the energy needs of Burkina Faso's population. However, it was primarily in the military realm that Ouagadougou sought Moscow's assistance. 3 days before the Ilyushin Il-76 airlifter landed on November 7, Burkina Faso's Minister of Defense, Colonel Kassim Koulibaly, had visited Moscow to confer with his counterpart, Sergei Shoigu. Koulibaly approved progressing into the practical phase of defense cooperation between the two nations. This transition had been preceded by a theoretical phase several weeks earlier, during which President Traoré had received a Russian delegation led by Deputy Defense Minister Yunusbek Yevkurov in September. The Burkinabe president had outlined discussions focusing on various areas of cooperation, primarily in the military sector, including the training of Burkinabe soldiers and officers at all levels, with a particular emphasis on pilot training in Russia. Ibrahim Traoré, the president of Burkina Faso, emphasized Russia's significant role in defeating Nazism during World War II, a fact that is often overlooked or forgotten. Addressing a plenary session of the Russia-Africa Summit, Traoré highlighted Russia's substantial sacrifices in liberating Europe and the world from the grip of Nazism. Traoré said that Russia and Africa share a common history, acknowledging the historical importance of Africa and Russia's contributions to the fight against Nazism, which are frequently underestimated or ignored. During his speech at the summit, Traoré expressed optimism about establishing a fair world order and strengthening bilateral relations between Russia and Burkina Faso. He emphasized the shared perspectives and aspirations between the two nations, foreseeing opportunities for a brighter future. That was the day when experts knew that Russia and Burkina Faso had decided on a future together. Telling everyone that the two countries have a common history meant the plan was to have a future together. Therefore, a Russian delegation engaged in discussions with Burkina Faso's interim president Ibrahim Traoré during a meeting encompassing talks on potential military collaboration as outlined by the Burkinabe presidency. The visit, led by Russian Deputy Defense Minister Yunusbek Yevkurov, served as a follow-up to discussions between Traoré and Russian President Vladimir Putin at the Russia-Africa Summit. The junta-led West African nation's ties with Moscow garnered attention since it expelled French troops in February, leading to speculation that it might deepen security relations with Russia, akin to neighboring Mali, where Russian Wagner mercenaries were active. The meeting addressed areas of cooperation primarily focused on the military sphere, encompassing the training of Burkinabe officer cadets and officers at all levels, including pilots in Russia, as highlighted in the statement. This made the West scared. It meant that Burkina Faso was moving to have a powerful ally that could resolve its terrorism problem. This meant ending the French tactic of using fear to secure a safe ground in Burkina Faso. Earlier, when Wagner Group's leader was alive, It was expected that if talks proceed, Wagner mercenaries would be deployed. However, after his demise, the Russian defense minister took over and discussed military cooperation with his Burkina Faso counterpart, Kassoum Coulibaly. Expressing appreciation for Coulibaly's prompt visit to Russia to form an interdepartmental delegation and collaborate on enhancing defense, cooperation, and economic ties, Shoigu highlighted the relationship between Russia and Burkina Faso, emphasizing mutual respect and consideration of each other's interests, which had gained positive momentum in recent years. So, what happened just recently that has become a nightmare for the West? Previously, Burkina Faso's military-backed president had indicated that Russian troops might be dispatched to combat jihadists in the West African country if necessary. During an interview, Ibrahim Traoré noted that Russia had proposed logistical and tactical training, and they were prepared to provide any weaponry required by Burkina Faso. Mr. Traoré highlighted that there were no limitations on procurement from Russia, China, Turkey, or Iran, unlike some other nations. This came amid reports that at least 100 Russian fighters had been sent to the African country as military instructors the previous week. This development also sparked speculation about Burkina Faso, strengthening security ties with Russia, akin to neighboring Mali, where Russian Wagner mercenaries operated. The junta-led country's relations with Moscow had been scrutinized since it expelled French troops in early 2023. Burkina Faso had been fighting against Islamist groups affiliated with Al-Qaeda and Islamic State, which had seized control of vast areas of land and displaced millions of people in the Sahel region. Now, it was reported that a contingent of Russian military personnel had flown into Burkina Faso's capital, Ouagadougou, on Wednesday, marking what appeared to be the first significant deployment of Russian troops to the West African country, as stated by two foreign security sources on Thursday. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. With a plan to train Burkinabe troops and totally wipe out all terrorists from Burkina Faso, the Russian troops are destined to complete their mission. This is coherent with what Russia's defense ministry had announced, that a group of 100 servicemen would reach Burkina Faso to ensure the safety of the country's leader, Ibrahim Traoré, and the Burkinabe people. It had also indicated that a further 200 would be deployed in the near future. The aircraft that reached Burkina Faso was an Il-76, the workhorse of the Russian military. The deployment would exacerbate Western concerns about Russia's expanding influence in Africa's Sahel region, where a series of coups had brought Moscow-friendly juntas to power in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, reshaping a protracted regional conflict with insurgents linked to Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. Further collaboration could be on the horizon as the military leaders of Niger and neighboring Chad made separate official visits to Moscow in January. But in what capacity are Russian troops coming to Burkina Faso? In other words, whether they are Russian troops or private military companies. The developments have sparked jealousy in the West, which regards Russia's recent military actions in Africa with suspicion. Following the disbandment of the Wagner Group, a private military company unofficially serving Russian interests in Africa, Russian President Vladimir Putin has launched a new initiative known as the Africa Corps. The official deployment of troops to Burkina Faso signals strengthening ties between the country and Putin's administration. Despite the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, Moscow has chosen to aid Burkina Faso's military junta by dispatching 100 military personnel to Ouagadougou. As indicated in a Telegram post, these soldiers have been assigned the task of safeguarding junta leader Ibrahim Traoré and the general populace from terrorist threats. However, upon the arrival of members of the Russian Africa Corps in the capital, it became apparent that they would effectively replace the disbanded Wagner Group. Unlike Wagner, this new unit will operate under the direct command of Russia's defense ministry. Furthermore, another 200 soldiers are scheduled to be sent to the region soon. The arrival of Russian soldiers has received praise from supporters of the junta in Ouagadougou. Nestor Podas, a junta-affiliated leader, voiced his approval, stating that the soldiers were there to train Burkinabe forces in handling the weapons procured by the state. Even individuals with no allegiance to the junta or those opposed to the military regime may find solace in the presence of Russian troops. Putin's decision to deploy Africa Corps soldiers to the Sahel region underscores Russia's increasing influence on the continent, particularly in West Africa. According to Russian historian Irina Filatova, the Africa Corps is intended for deployment in 5 African countries: Burkina Faso, Libya, the Central African Republic, Mali, and Niger. Filatova highlights that Russia is emerging as the preferred security partner for these nations, positioning itself as a significant player in African affairs. That's because Russia offers security, unlike France, which abused the precarious security situation as an excuse to station its troops. Prior to the establishment of the Africa Corps, Wagner mercenaries were engaged in combating Islamist terror in the region and providing security for local leaders. The deployment of Russian troops in Burkina Faso began with the arrival of the initial batch of 100 soldiers in the country. This announcement was made by Africa Corps, the newly established Russian military unit, taking over from the paramilitary group Wagner. But how is the West responding to this? Well, the West is burning in jealousy. It's being said that the Kremlin wastes no time in its efforts to restructure Africa. In other words, Russia is being portrayed as a clever country looking to increase its influence in Africa. However, it is yet to be seen what the West would call the decades-long Western troops' presence in African countries, bringing potentially no concrete outcomes. West also portrays Putin as a man who should not be trusted. Therefore, it's being said that when Prigozhin, the leader of Wagner, rebelled against the Russian military, directing his mercenaries to march towards Moscow in June 2023, he clearly crossed a boundary with Putin. Just 8 weeks later, he was presumed dead in a plane crash. By late November, the French newspaper Le Monde reported the appearance of the name Africa Corps for the first time. According to reports, some members of the unit are believed to be former Wagner mercenaries, while others are being recruited from the countries where they will be deployed. Putin's actions in Africa are seen as primarily focused on safeguarding regimes rather than primarily combating jihadists, according to French military analyst General Dominique Trinquant. But in reality, Russia is an alternative to France for Africa. Since the coup in September 2022, the junta has distanced itself from its former ally, France. Despite France's status as the former colonial ruler, which maintained close ties after Burkina Faso gained independence in 1960, the junta expelled French troops and strengthened its relations with Russia. Recently, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali have also turned away from ECOWAS, the regional economic alliance supported by the West. However, this shift is not solely about economic convenience. The partnership between Russia and West African nations may bring significant political advantages for Putin, potentially influencing votes in the UN General Assembly and Security Council. But that's a good deal. Analysts suggested that the support of Sahel countries for Russia could encourage other African nations to follow suit, increasing Putin's influence beyond the region. Therefore, while Russia maintains economic interests in the Sahel's abundant mineral resources, Putin's expanding influence in the Sahel may have wider geopolitical implications. It's believed that the Corps may extend its deployment beyond countries where Russian mercenaries previously operated, potentially including Niger. The volatile situation in the Sahel facilitates Kremlin expansion. Last September, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, under junta rule, formed the Alliance of Sahel States for Defense, subsequently withdrawing from the Economic Community of West African States in January. But is it true that Russia will soon build a base in Burkina Faso? Burkina Defense Minister Kassoum Koulibaly clarified recent reports regarding establishing a Russian military base in the country, stating that there are currently no discussions regarding such a base. During an interview, the defense minister disclosed that Burkina Faso is acquiring weapons from Russia at favorable prices and intends to continue this collaboration. However, he said that he would not disclose the specific equipment to be obtained, but Burkina Faso has placed orders, and that is confirmed. As for the military base, this is something that Burkina Faso has to deal with. Russian troops were deployed to Burkina Faso, and they could potentially put an end to the terrorist problem in the region. Russian forces would genuinely engage in combat against terrorists, contrasting with the French troops that allowed terrorists to persist to justify their continuous military presence in the country. Russian troops would take a more aggressive and effective approach to combating terrorism compared to their French counterparts, possibly through robust military operations and engagement. And the deployment of Russian troops to Burkina Faso could potentially pave the way for the establishment of a Russian military base in the region. This development would not come as a surprise. However, it will really be a nightmare for the West. With Russian troops now on the groundwork is laid for potential long-term military infrastructure. Establishing a military base would grant Russia a strategic foothold in West Africa, facilitating a greater military presence and operational capabilities in the area. Such a base could also serve as a hub for joint military exercises, intelligence activities, and projecting influence beyond Burkina Faso's borders. Furthermore, the construction of a Russian military base in Burkina Faso would likely form part of a broader geopolitical strategy aimed at challenging Western hegemony in the region. Russia may seek to bolster its relationships with African nations and expand its influence into territories traditionally dominated by Western powers. However, the establishment of a Russian military base in Burkina Faso would be subject to various factors, including diplomatic negotiations, local political dynamics, and potential opposition from other regional stakeholders. But the end result would be establishing a military base. What do you think? How much time would Russian troops take to wipe out all terrorists from Burkina Faso's soil? Do you believe that Russian troops should only train Burkinabe troops instead of themselves carrying out operations? In the comment section right below, share your thoughts on how the West would react to this news. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.